The Pistons, wow, I was expecting a lot of them. I was expecting them to get a top 4 seed, make a run for the NBA Finals, but they just let me down. Okay, nah, I'm playing. The Pistons are one of the few teams in which probably met expectations. Like, nobody expected anything from the Pistons, and they didn't really disappoint us, to be honest. Their season summarized by marquee vets being offloaded in Blake Griffin and Derrick Rose, the emergence of Jeremy Grant, who kind of bet on himself, and that bet kind of paid off, and then Killian, Sadiq, and Isaiah Stewart, all of the Detroit Pistons rookies, they all showed signs of certain things. Looking at these players by themselves, we'll start out with probably the player who's the only member of the core, possibly, and that's Jeremy Grant. He had a breakout season this year, averaging 20 plus points per game. He's always been a gifted player because of his combination of athleticism and size, and he really always had those gifts and exemplified them on the defensive end, but this year he really exemplified them on the offensive end. On the offense, you kind of need an exact defender on Jeremy Grant at all times to pose as a great stopper, because he's much faster than a traditional power forward and he's much bigger than small ball small forward, so he's kind of a mismatch nightmare. And on the defensive end, we've always known this about Jeremy. He's extremely versatile and he can comfortably switch 1 through 5. Driving to the rim was his preferred way of scoring, using his size and athleticism to get to the rim. He drew a lot of fouls and got a lot of points from the charity stripe. His improved ball handle over this past season gave him a lot more avenues and pathways to get to the rim. He really diversified his skill set this season in Detroit. In his time in Philly, OKC, and Denver, basically 75% of his field goal attempts were either at the rim or from 3. This season, he made more of an effort to score from the other areas on the floor. Jeremy can still grow his game quite a bit though. He wasn't really someone who created his own shot from 3-point. Even though I talked about his improved handle, he doesn't really use that handle to create space on the perimeter that much. He really uses it to get to the rim. And he can still improve as a playmaker. His playmaking, for being a number 1 option for the first time in his career, it was pretty solid, but less than ideal for being a number 1 option. I'm confident his assists per game will improve with time. Now we can talk about the Pistons prospects. There are 3 rookies this year. One being Sadiq Bey, who was all rookie first team. Congratulations to him. He's going to be probably one of the best 3-and-D wings in the league for some time. He's got great size. He has an ideal NBA frame. He's very strong. He looks stronger than 215 pounds, I'll tell you that much, but apparently he's 215 pounds. He's a pretty great shooter. He had a great 3-point percentage as a rookie on a team missing a lot of playmaking talent. And he shoots well from the free throw line, which is always a solid benchmark for just how good of a shooter someone is. He's somebody who knows his role. He came into the league heralded as a 3-and-D versatile forward, and his play reflected such. A high percentage of his shots are catch and shoot threes, and he only really scores at the rim with open cuts or attacking hard closeouts. I don't think Sadiq Bey's ceiling is that high, even though he made all rookie first team, because he doesn't really have a great handle. I mean, it really only consists of straight line drives. And his offensive skill set is very vanilla. Diversifying that somewhat will untap his potential, but as of right now, his ceiling seems to be as a great starting 3-and-D wing. But if he can improve his handle and maybe add some ability to shoot off the bounce, he can turn into a 3-and-D starter that is capable of scoring 16 or 17 points a night at some point in his career. Killian Hayes was the Pistons' highest draft pick this year. Due to injury early in the season, he didn't really get to play much, but some of the strengths we saw in his play was that he's a true point guard. He's very wired to pass. His head is always up in the fast break, and he's always actively looking for the open man, as opposed to analyzing the best method to getting to the rim himself, which kinda can be looked as a downfall as much of a strength, but these are just signs that we know Killian Hayes is a true pass-first point guard. He's very patient in the pick and roll and very adept at finding the best lob angle or spotting hedges from the corner early on to dot open shooters. He's already a solid defender, he's got pretty good size against opposing point guards, and he's quite disruptive on ball and in passing lanes. He's got very active hands for dig downs on bigs in the post as well. He's also pretty confident in the mid-range. He took quite a few shots from 3 to 16 feet, primarily foul line extended pull-ups or floaters in the paint off of pick and roll play. He's got a pretty crafty handle. It's not the quickest, but he's able to break out a spin move or behind the back in almost the perfect situation. That being said, Killian has a lot of things to improve in. He's not an assertive scorer at all. He's much more passive, and he doesn't look for his own shot nearly enough. And that kind of limits how good of a playmaker you can be if you're not looking for your own shot that much. He also really struggled to finish this season. He was a very creative finisher overseas, but it seems tough for him to finish in a more athletic league like the NBA. It was very tough for him to avoid contact or finish through contact this year. And something that's going to kind of hold him back is his burst. He's not the bounciest or fastest point guard at top speed, so he's really going to have to rely on his craftiness to finish in that in-between area and to learn how to finish around contact. The third rookie for the Pistons to talk about is Isaiah Stewart. He made All-Rookie second team this year. He was a very active screen setter. He cut really hard after setting screens on or off the ball, and this was his main method for getting open for his assisted 2-point field goals. The best thing for him was that he looked a lot more mobile this year for the Pistons than he looked in college at UW. In college, he just looked very slow and burly, and was kind of a big knack on him coming into the league, and it hurt his draft stock. Now he kind of looks spry in my opinion. He's got solid footwork for a rookie big man. He can maneuver decently with pivots off of offensive rebounds or drop-off passes, and from time to time when he would get a post-up touch. He's also pretty disruptive. He contested a lot of drives and lob attempts, and he stopped quite a few. He's a pretty solid rebounder. He was a solid per 100 rebounder, and he was top 30 in offensive rebound percentage. And his shooting was kind of a positive. He had a decent percentage from three-point land on a low clip. It's going to be tougher on Isaiah Stewart moving forward in the league because he doesn't really have that much defensive versatility. He still really can't guard on the perimeter at all. It just doesn't look natural for him, and like I said, he still is a bit slow-footed. So he's still going to get killed on switches and defending in space, and he doesn't really have the biggest vertical. He's already a tad short for a center, and normally centers who are a bit shorter, you'd like them to have a higher vertical to kind of make up for it. So this is kind of going to hold him down on the defensive end when he goes against elite low post bigs. But I mean, being a bit more advanced on the mental aspect of defense can kind of make up for your athletic deficiencies. So if Isaiah Stewart can really just get up to speed on that end, learning the mental aspect of defense, he can kind of make up for that and be a very serviceable big man for the league for years to come, especially for this Detroit Pistons team for the foreseeable future. I don't know if he can be a starting center ideally for the Pistons, but he could be a very valuable backup. Looking to the offseason, I have some questions for Detroit. Is Jeremy Grant going to be a part of this team's long-term future? He's on a steal of a contract for the next 2 years. He's 26, entering his prime. He's probably got 5 to 6 years of it left. Detroit isn't exactly a free agent hotspot, and they got Jeremy Grant in free agency, so I think they should value that and keep him, because I don't think they're really going to land marquee free agents like that ever. Like, this is probably one of their biggest free agency signings in the past 20 years. Though Jeremy will definitely be a hot commodity in terms of teams looking to add a versatile 3-and-D forward that can also score for himself, so Jeremy Grant could hold a lot of value in terms of a big-time trade. Another question is, can Detroit add some veterans to mentor this young team? We know that simply having a team full of players 25 or younger is not a great recipe for development. I kind of thought Rose would be a fantastic veteran point guard to have for Killian Hayes, but they cashed in on his value. Some veterans could be very good for the development of Killian, Sadiq, and Isaiah Stewart. Mason Plumlee has been a solid addition, a veteran, high IQ center, pretty good playmaker. He could have a pretty good impact on Isaiah Stewart for however long he's there for. Another question is, what will Detroit do with Josh Jackson and DSJ? These are two guys who kind of somewhat found themselves in Detroit after kind of not living up to their hype at their former destinations. Now we gotta get into the draft, which is kind of the most exciting part of Detroit's season. Their best draft prospect or target would definitely be Jalen Green. He's this draft's best scorer in my opinion. He's got a very good dynamic handle. He can chain moves together very fluidly. He's comfortable creating in the ISO situation for mid-range as well as threes with step back gathers and snatch back dribbles. He's a great finisher. He's extremely athletic, especially finishing above the rim, but he doesn't only rely on his athleticism. He has very acrobatic finishes through and around contact, and for being a great scorer, he's a very solid and very willing playmaker as well. A great sign is that he's done this against former NBA players in the G League. I think he definitely has the capability to turn into one of the league's best scorers. He has some defensive concerns, but the Pistons need a bucket getter and someone with offensive all-star / superstar potential, and I think Jalen Green definitely has that. And he'd be this team's 2 guard. You could surround him with Killian Hayes and Jeremy Grant and Saddiq Bey, who are great defenders on the perimeter. The next best prospect would be Cade Cunningham. He's the best prospect according to many in this draft. He's one of the draft's best shot creators, one of the draft's best passers. His assists per game numbers weren't that high, but he's adept at making tough passes cross court or in a tight window. He's got great size as a 6'8" point guard, which allows him to see over defenses, take on a smaller guard in the post, and comfortably switch 1 through 3 or maybe even 1 through 4. He's a great 3-point shooter in catch and shoot or off the dribble situations. His handle is a bit slow for being a primary ball handler, but it's something he's going to have to work at to be an elite offensive weapon in the NBA. Defensive consistency was kind of an issue, though his potential as an extremely versatile defender is through the roof. I think he could easily play the 2 guard next to Killian. It would be a great playmaking backcourt and it would add the shot creation that the Pistons need. For this team's direction, they're obviously rebuilding. I mean, even though Jeremy Grant had a great season, a breakout season, I don't think he's this team's franchise player. I think they still need to find that guy. They have a lot of young talent on this team that's still developing and still kind of raw. They're still looking for that guy. So yeah. There's quite a few teams that are in the position to where they're not playoff locks or championship contenders, but rather young ascending teams that will be looking to compete and snag a playoff spot rather than tank and embrace a rebuild. The Pistons are not one of those teams. They're actually rebuilding. They currently have an extremely versatile wing in Jeremy Grant, who's become a great scorer with more opportunity in Detroit, but he alone as a number 1 option won't be able to lead the Pistons back to respectability. In Detroit, there is an intriguing assemblance of young talent. Isaiah Stewart shows promise as a rim runner and rim protector who can space the floor. Saddiq Bey is already a prototypical 3-and-D forward who's very seasoned out of Villanova. And the recent lotto pick Killian Hayes has shown the signs to be a great floor general and a lockdown point guard. If he can round out his offensive game, he has all-star potential in my opinion. In-house, there's a lot of interesting young talent, but I think Detroit can truly find the face of their franchise with potentially a top 5 pick in this loaded 2021 class.